When I actually started out 20 years ago, I was actually in pharmaceutical distribution. And though I loved being with medicine and working with patients and that kind of aspect, I struggled with that side of it. I really wanted to understand.
All right, we're live. So I have to tell you this something right off, right? When I first got this request that this person wants to be a guest and they want to talk about the flow technology and single flow meters, I have no idea what this stuff is, right? I work in quality, I work in software, but I wanted to bring this person on and learn from them. So here we are. So today's guest is Bethany Silva. She is the Life Sciences Industry Manager at Andres & Hauser. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Harsh. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, so after that very innocent intro, I want to set the stage by just asking you can you explain how this single flow meter works?
Yeah. So in traditional biologics manufacturing, flow is a critical process parameter. It's something that helps the control of the process and helps do additions and helps with the control strategy. In traditional stainless, we have a lot of cool technologies that we can use for that. But in single use, when a customer is starting to implement single use type of process systems, they struggle with the same type of technologies that they can utilize in stainless. So Andres & Hauser has developed a single-use flow meter that is based on the Coriolis principle of technology for flow. So it's taking something that we already utilize in a very robust, repeatable process in stainless and bringing that same technology into single use with a customer that may be looking at using that for their process instead.
Okay. And just to double click on that question, so what is this Coriolis type flow meter and what other types are out there that companies use?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different types of flow technology somebody could use to measure flow. Some of them have their pros and cons. So we have electromagnetic, which we call mag meter, that works very well. It's inline, so there's no need to add anything on to the pipe itself. But it also requires conductive type of fluid. So the fluid itself has to have some type of conductive capacitance to it. So that has its limitations, especially in pharmaceuticals, because a lot of our, especially like our water for injection, doesn't have a conductive liquid to it. So we then have to look at other technologies. We have ultrasonic that we could utilize as well, but that is also dependent on the fluid. So it's very fluid dependent, where Coriolis is actually utilizing the excitations of the vibrations of a tube, and those are being detected with coils. So that actually is completely independent of the liquid. So it doesn't matter if it's water, if it's got solids, or if it's got air bubbles or anything like that. So the Coriolis tends to be the more reliable technology to use for biologics and pharmaceutical manufacturing. So that's the one that we kind of mainstay in the stainless. It just hasn't really had the ability to be implemented in single use.
Okay. And typically for a life science or a biotech company, again, you can give me specific numbers, or if you don't want, you can just give a ballpark. But how many of these flow meters do they typically need, and what's the cost of implementing one, taking into account qualification and calibration or whatever needs to happen to put it into production use?
Yeah, so it'd be difficult to give an exact number, but because every train system, every suite has multiple skids with multiple meters on there. So if you took like a traditional chromatography system that's in downstream, there's probably anywhere between 3 and 6 Coriolis flow meters on that system. And those tend to be very low flow, and flow is very critical on the chromatography systems. But a lot of customers will have multiple chromatography systems just in their one production line. So it's hard to give an exact number, but it can be one production line could have 30 Coriolis flow meters on there. And so the costs of them, I mean, it's not, once the sensor itself is actually installed, you still have to do the maintenance, the calibrations to it. Right. The metrology has to pull it. And then there's usually a flow rig that these are set up to, and then they're calibrated to that flow rig. So there's a lot of manual maintenance that can happen with the flow meters. But one thing that we've implemented in both our stainless and our single-use Coriolis flow meters is something that we call a verification. And so that's an inline, almost like a predictive maintenance type of technology that allows us to check the instruments to make sure that they're still at the same quality that they did when they left the factory or when they were last calibrated. So it gives us some kind of insurance in between the calibration points, which is nice because it's all traceable and can be brought back to a NIST traceable reference.
Okay, great. And as I was researching on this topic, so I know there's other instrumentation and process automation companies that are making similar type of Coriolis flow meters, and they have different pros and cons. So what separates the one that Anderson Hauser makes? Like, what are some of the product features that separate it from the others?
Yeah. So one of the big key things is that there are lots of different technologies, as I mentioned. So there are other type of single-use flow meters like the ultrasonics. There's a clamp-on style and inline, and they have a fit for purpose. So there's good applications for them as well. They're not as accurate, so their accuracy level is more like plus or minus 2%, plus or minus 5%. With Coriolis, you can get down to 0.5% accuracy. So in that real critical type of applications, when the flow accuracy is critical to that application, then we want to use something like Coriolis. So there are only one other Coriolis flow meter that's in single use that I'm aware of, and that one actually uses single use plastic tubes. And unfortunately, Coriolis doesn't work very well with plastic. It's really it's actually pretty steel dependent because of the vibrations that are needed. When a fluid is in the plastic, like a PEEK, it actually absorbs some of that fluid and it no longer excites the same way. So we have designed ours to actually have stainless tubes, even though they're single use. We still utilize stainless steel 316L as the tubing to make sure that the Coriolis principle is still usable. So that's one thing that differentiates us, is we are the only ones that have a Coriolis that's actually made of steel, which is Coriolis principle. The other big differentiator is that being able to do those verifications. Right now, when we go into single use, traditional stainless steel sensors tend to have calibrations done on regular intervals. So that was designed based on criticality of that measurement point. So somebody may have said, okay, every 6 months, this meter needs to be calibrated. When you're doing single use, there is no really way to calibrate in the field because you can't break the sterile boundary, and it's implemented in a complete assembly. What we've done is implemented that verification so that we can verify and guarantee that the calibration that was done at the factory is now still good in the field. So it's an actual ability to use the calibration that was given at the factory. And we have a whole camera system installed in the sensor so that it actually uploads all the factory calibrations into the transmitter. It runs that verification. It gives the green light that everything is good or fail if things have been damaged in shipment or while it was in storage. So there's a lot of insurance that goes on with having this verification process built into our sensors.
Interesting. When you were talking, this is really off topic, right? So when you were talking about the plastic and steel comparison, it reminded me of that scene from Breaking Bad where, I don't know if you watched that show or heard about it.
Oh, I have years ago.
Yeah. So it's like there's this scene, I don't exactly remember, but it's like Walter White is telling Jesse to like go and get like a storage tote or something, and it's like he tells him exactly what type of plastic it needs to be and what logo at the bottom. Chemistry and engineering is beautiful, right? Like people who know it, they know exactly what works. And he doesn't get it, and whatever he's asked to do, he doesn't get that tote, and he instead puts all the stuff that he wants to decompose or whatever he was doing, he puts it in his bathtub. And that was a complete no-no because that chemical would go through his entire bathtub. And when Walter comes to his house, he sees a big hole, and he's like, I told you to get that specific plastic because that's the one it will not react with. Anything else, it will go right through, right? So anyways, when you were talking about the plastic and steel, it's like small things like that. I don't know, right? I mean, but it makes a lot of difference to whoever's designing that instrument or material.
Yeah, we're seeing it just even on the stainless steel. We're seeing a lot of like what we call salty buffers, like high concentrated buffers, and they require even more aggressive resistant type of materials than 316L. So a lot of times we're seeing like C22 and the Hastelloys, the exotic alloys come into play because they're the only thing that can withstand a lot of those really high intensity buffer concentrations. So we're seeing like all the materials that's coming into a very important, particularly to the flow meters, because they are in contact with it. You have to be very considerate of what you're using.
Okay. And if you were to look at your portfolio of clients or customers who are using these flow meters, like, is it mostly life sciences or is it like other industries that are also benefiting from it? Can you talk on that?
Yeah. Yeah. So Hauser does support all 7 major industries. There's a lot of different industries, and in the industrial market, more of like the chemical, oil and gas, there's food and beverage, water, wastewater, power and energy, and then life sciences. So the Coriolis fits in most of those industries. Pharmaceuticals manufacturers have seen the most advantages of using the Coriolis. Sometimes it's a little bit, as I said, with that conductive requirement for electromagnetic mag meters, then that may be a better fit for some of those industries. So it depends on the flow meter type, the technology. We do offer different technologies for all those different industries. But this single-use flow meter, really it's meant for the biologics manufacturing and pharmaceuticals. We're the only ones that have the criticality of the CIP and SIP systems and the cleaning validation that's required that would enable single-use to make sense. There are some other industries that are interested in looking at whether single-use makes sense for them, but this particular flow meter, that's what it's really geared towards.
Okay. And then when your team or the other people in your company are implementing or installing these kind of flow meters for different industries, so how does it look? Let's say you're working with a big pharma like Pfizer or a big food and beverage or company like Nestle and a oil and gas company like Chevron. Mm-hmm. How is that implementation different for all three of them? Like, it sounds like the product is the same, just how it fits into that manufacturing or whatever layout where these flow meters are used. Have you seen any like difference in approaches of how these are used or fitted?
Yeah, I mean, especially with things like oil and gas, they're so aggressive and they're much larger. So, but you're right, the technologies are pretty much going to be the same. We're going to use these kind of core 4 or 5 different the mag meters, the Coriolis. We do have a vortex meter and the ultrasonic. There's a couple others, but those are kind of the mainstay type of technologies that you would utilize across all those industries. But how they get utilized, the regulations that are required. Obviously, with chemical, there's a lot more safety. We follow a lot more of the SIL aspect of it. Same thing with oil and gas. There's a lot of safety aspects built into the meter. With life sciences, obviously, it's a lot more on our surface finish and our compatibility with 316L, having to utilize that, adhering to the ASME VPE requirements. There's a lot of different regulations around each industry that we have to follow and comply with. But each one's technology is pretty much going to be the same. It's just how it actually gets integrated. But I'll tell you, those oil and gas meters can get quite big. And life science, they can get quite small.
Yep. Yeah. So in terms of the advancements, let's say in the flow technology space, what are some of the things that, if you can share without sharing too much of confidential stuff, but what are some of the things that Andres and Hauser is kind of working on to continue being a leader in that flow technology space? Any trends or any product developments that you're working on that you're excited about?
Yeah, so the single use, being able to offer sensors that are as robust and reliable as we're expecting in stainless and bring that to the single use world, that is something that we're definitely focused on. We're going to expand on that. We're going to bring other types of technologies because Anderson House is just more than just flow. We do level and pressure, temperature, liquid analytics. So we'll continue to expand on the instrumentation that we bring into the single-use offering. One other aspect that we focus a lot on is being able to move into more predictive maintenance. So that idea of let's make these smart sensors, let the sensor tell us when it's starting to degrade, instead of just this kind of time-based preventative maintenance type of thought process when we're looking at how we maintain and best support them. So moving more into those predictive maintenance, smart sensors, that's another focus for Endress, and also looking at the ability to do multi-parameters out of the sensors. So like with our flow, with Coriolis, we can actually get density, we can get temperature, we can get mass flow. There's a couple different types of measurements that we can get out of that same 1 meter. And we're looking at whether can be even further expanded upon. Can we bring additional things into one sensor so that the customer has maybe one sensor that can do multiple? And then also looking at soft sensors. Soft sensors are basically a hard sensor that has a software built into it that can correlate the data. So it doesn't always have to be that. Yeah, so that direct measurement, we can actually do more indirect measurements and predictive type of measurements. So that will help play into the AI world as we look into data analytics and how much can we actually get from each one of these sensors, how much information can we gather from this one measurement point. So those are the things that we're looking for in the future to kind of keep up with the trends and help enable a lot of this digital pharma 4.0 type of initiatives.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's where when you mention about having that data in real time, so you're not being reactive, you're being proactive with the predictive analytics or just watching the trends from that data collection, right? And that's a lot of instrument and process automation efforts are heading in that direction from day one, because manual logbooks and noting of data and copy pasting has its own slew of data integrity issues that come with it. So having an instrument that has this capability of getting that data transferred to a computer or somewhere and then analyzing that on top of it with like reporting capabilities, that's huge.
Yeah, enabling the ability to also connect into cloud. So that's another aspect that we're looking at, is making sure that we are able to connect into the clouds, because a lot of the analysis is actually going to be done in clouds. It's sometimes not even done in real hardware anymore.
So you've had an amazing career in this industry, in this STEM field, as successful career. So what advice would you have for other women who are also aspiring to enter and thrive in this sector and maybe be in a position like you?
Yeah. I started out really looking at liquid analytics, the traditional pH and DO types of technologies, very proven, already established, and then started to move into like capacitance and really found a passion for supporting customers and what their initiatives were for what we call the lab to process development. They developed a product and now they got to get it into mass production, and that scale up really, it just rung a bell for me. I just found that was where I felt the most passionate, that I felt like I could actually support customers. I understood what their initiative was. I understood how to get them to that initiative. So I think for anybody looking to aspire into this type of field, it's really about just finding that thing that kind of lights you up. It sounds simple, but if you can find that thing that kind of gives you that passion and that momentum, because there are going to be a lot of days that are difficult to get through, but that passion, that curiosity that you naturally have for something, that will persevere and get you through. So that would be my recommendation. Definitely look for those things that you get excited about.
Right. And a lot of us, we don't do that part, right? Because of whatever reasons, right? We have a job, but we probably know that we don't like it, but we just don't want to go through that process of finding something else. But ultimately, like every person I've asked this question to has said other things, but they've always said what you just said is like, hey, if you're not getting like that energy from doing what you're doing, then you should just do something else, because it takes a lot of effort to find that. So for people like you who found it, like it's amazing. But yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. The real distribution. I was on the distributor end. And though I loved being with medicine and working with patients and that kind of aspect, I struggled with that side of it. I really wanted to understand the manufacturing side of it, the development side of it. So I kind of knew I was in the wrong spot. A lot of people will, like you said, they'll just accept that that's kind of good enough. But if they can push themselves to try and find something that they can get excited about every day, I think in the long run, it makes everybody more successful.
Yeah. Listen, I know you're extremely busy, and Anderson Hauser is, from what I researched, it's a huge organization. You are in a very key role for managing this life sciences industry division. So I want to ask you one last question before we wrap this up is, what's your personal leadership philosophy? Like, how do you approach leadership within your team or within collaborating with other industry partners?
Yeah, I think a lot of this is built off trust. Whether it's working with industry collaborators or the life science team here at Anderson Hauser or other teammates, when you can trust that you can put faith in what the others can do and build that competency that you establish for yourself so that other people can trust you, I think that's key. It also empowers everybody, right? So they feel a sense of responsibility to each other. But if we can be supportive of each other and trust each other, whether it's working with industry collaborators or our teammates, I think that's the basis of leading, really, is building that trust, building that empowerment.
Yeah, I read this quote somewhere, which is like, trust is the ultimate currency in any relationship. So I think that sounds like
Yes.
a good summary of your answer.
Yes.
All right.
Very much.
Thank you, Bethany. It was really great talking to you, and I wish you all the success with everything you're doing in the company and all the projects you're working on. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Harsh. It's been great talking to you as well. Thank you for having me.